Clarinetist Carlos Cordeiro is at the forefront of today's 21st century performers with his internationally visible activities in broadcasting new music, collaborating with living composers, bridging different disciplines, improvising and performing on the different instruments of the clarinet family. An orchestral musician, a chamber musician, and a soloist. Carlos has toured the whole world basically, and he's played in a lot of very famous instrumental groups, ensembles, including the Argento New Music Project, KLA, Reflex Ensemble, New York New Music Ensemble, Metropolis Ensemble, Da Camera Young Artists, Tactus, and the Lucerne Festival. He's also a former member of Load Bank Quartet and TAC Ensemble. Conductors and coaches that he's worked with include Pierre Boulez, Antonio Sayote, Magnus Lindberg, Chen Halevi, Anssi Kartunen, Alain Damier, Philippe Coupé, Larry Combs, Ernesto Molinari, Marcus Weiss, and Eduardo Leandro, among others. Carlos is currently a PhD student at RCM London. He's also freelancing as a soloist and chamber musician. Carlos holds a master's degree in contemporary performance from Manhattan School of Music, a master's degree from Rice University, a bachelor's degree from ESMAE, Portugal, and as I said, he's currently a PhD student in London. Enjoy this interview with Carlos Cordeiro.
So the first thing, of course, is I love playing clarinet. It's pleasurable for me to practice, to like discover the instrument and just spend time with it. And on top of that, I love playing complexist music, like the process of unraveling a score, the steps I take to like learn all the rhythms, learn all the different intonations that I have to play. It's really enjoyable for me, and being able to perform that kind of music exactly as written or as closely as humanly possible, it's really satisfying to me. Over the last 8 9 years, I've dedicated myself to this kind of music. I only play new music,
Yeah.
and I've been very lucky to do so. I spent 10 years in New York City, where I did a lot of contemporary music, and I discovered complex music. And I really want to understand how this music works, how it's received, how it's performed, and how it can be more accessible both to performances and audiences. So that's where my research and my topic comes from. Um, the purpose of my research is very briefly, so like to identify and understand, create or suggest a set of tools to approach and resolve the challenges of notation, techniques, and also their longevity, which is an important point in the performance of complexist music. This has invited and facilitated an investigation into performance practice of new music and also its ethics. This emerges from elements of my practice, all the work that I've done, and a critical reflection, of course, of um, of my interactions and while performing and doing all this different work with composers and musicians and audiences too. I kind of want to identify, I want to understand the concerns of this music and try to use my own practice, my own way of practicing and performing and engaging with people to understand this. And one thing that is very important to me, that you mentioned too, is community, is what's around. So this whole project, although it has me as the center, because I know my practice, I can analyze my practice, and before I try to understand anyone else, I need to understand myself. And that's true not just in music but in life, I guess. um, but yeah, it's a community research, because a composer like the idea of a composer as this genius at a desk is outdated. The image of the performer stoically on stage just doing this thing, it's outdated. Like we work as a community. I spend hours with student composers, listening to them, asking questions, trying to understand how the instrument works, and that creates better pieces. It's a whole And better pieces create happier audiences, happier performers, of course. So it's a whole community, and I think it's really important to see this as, or to see new music as a community more than just the composer, the performer, the audience, and we kind of just do these things separately. Whatever comes out of my research can have some kind of impact, both socially and intellectually. New music. Joan Arnau Pamias, he's a composer. He said something like, new music is a core artistic project based on critique. It's linked to modernity and what defines its nature, right? So I have to like, and also that new music is not judged by how it sounds, but but by its ideological stance as well. So all these things bring me to, you know, analyzing and thinking about my own practice and however it relates to other members of the community. Me, like I said, me doing a good job and being cooperative with composers might influence them positively in writing more challenging music and challenging themselves. Um, and an audience member that sees a positive and satisfying performance, both for composer and performer, will be more interested in that music. My playing is my research. Like it's really what it is. And although I'm curious to know how other people would work with my methods, how they respond to the way I do things and my way of learning and performing, it is a very autoethnographic process. Like today, I met a composer, and she's writing a piece for ensemble, and we sat, and she asked me a question about a multiphonic, so like a multiple sound, and slap tone, which is this like dry percussive effect. And because I do this every day, I practice this every day. I have a toolbox of this kind of sounds. I showed her like 10 different ways of approaching multiphonics. The piece changed because of that. But the opposite is also true. I had this composer that I'm working on a commission. She's writing a piece for me, and she asked me, "How can you speak through the clarinet?" And I took the mouthpiece off and started speaking through the clarinet. That's not what she meant. She meant like literally, how can I emulate the the sound of a human voice as closely as possible with just my instrument? And that's like a really big challenge that I've gladly taken. But it is what you said is very true. Most of what I do as a performer is try to break barriers, both, like I said, in communication and in community, but also in the instrument. You probably saw on the website this piece for contrabass clarinet. Um, so that piece is by far the hardest thing I've done to date. I worked very closely with Maxwell Delaney, which is a good friend of mine, and that piece took about 3 years to work. Like we had, I lost count of the amount of meetings that we had, and the idea was really to take this instrument that usually people see as slow, low, like this kind of comical kind of thing, and transform it completely into like this amazing, colorful, rich instrument that can play the extension of the piano, like the range of a piano. It has been the hardest thing that I've played to date, and it took me something like 9 months of daily practice to be able to just just perform it through. uh, but
Unbelievable.
but it's an amazing work, and I, as a performer, learned a lot from it and became a much better clarinetist
Wow.
from it as well. So it is really like this proves, proves the point that it is really it's a feedback loop, like you said. It's not a one-way street. It's not me getting a new piece. It's not the composer composing a new work. It's both of us learning a lot. This is a very important question in what I do. Like I said, I try to understand things in community. First of all, I try to be a positive influence. So I will start the other way. I'll start by by the bigger picture and go to my own body. There's a lot of performers, they don't take they see new music as something that will damage their technique, that will do something bad to their embouchure. But I try to be a positive influence in the way that anything is possible. You can do all these kind of crazy sounds and these kind of like crazy performances and still be able to play a beautiful Brahms or a beautiful Mozart or all of that. And I think it's really important to make people understand how the relations are important. Again, like I said before, all of this back and forth with composers, with fellow performers, all of this, like to me, it's what it means to be a performer in my community, is to be able to, by the work that I do, influence the people around me in a positive way and in a way that's going to make them want to go further. My experience, I've been performing only new music for, like I said, 7, 8 years. I played with Load Bang. It's a quartet from New York. Um, I did more than 200 premieres over 6 years with them. We did a lot of outreach. We worked with the New York Phil Very Young Composers, in which we work with composers that are up to 13, 14. And they're getting like all this exposure, and it's amazing. I work with TAC Ensemble as well, which is a very prominent ensemble in New York as well. Um, so all of that experience gives me a lot of things to think about and a lot of like material and data that I then can use both for my own performance and to try and tell people, look, this doesn't work and this is why. This is how we should do things. And that way, using my own experience to like influence the people around me. Now coming to the biggest challenge, that is like, does it mean to be a performer in my own body? In a physical way, the music that I perform most of the times require extra effort, from normal technique. Being the decoupling of the components of the playing itself. For example, Aaron Cassidy wrote one of the first pieces that I studied um, of New Complexity, but he decouples, for example, the fingers from the breathing, from the tongue, like all of these things. Like it's like separating your bow and your fingers and adding a third part, extreme registers. Many times you have to learn a new technique. So all of that requires a high awareness of all of your body, and especially speaking as a clarinetist, because it's what I know best, there's a lot of things that you don't see. Like there's a lot of like the whole air process, you can't see it. The whole voicing, tonguing, articulation, you can't see that. So it's always a challenge. Um, and yeah, that awareness make and the role it plays, it requires a very big awareness of the body as an instrument, and as an extension, and the instrument as an extension of the body. It also makes me think a lot of bias, because I am living my own experience within my body with all the things that I've been through and played and performed and all of that. So when I try to explain to someone, I can't, I have to think of that bias and how I see things. And of course, when I write my dissertation, and I forget who said that. I think it was Gablik. like an art that is rooted in a listening self. That was
Mhm.
something that I read. Yeah, Lewis Gablik, and it really made me think. Like this listening self within myself, and so that's the physical part, right? Excuse me. And then for a long time, I thought of myself as like this instrument for the composer's voice. Like I was just like something like a megaphone or something. But I find that more and more to not be true. And of course, it's not true. This was just like, a realization from my education. Um, but I try to pass that on to my colleagues that, you're not just a machine nor a filter. You're like an unimitable and essential part of the process and a part of a community. Um, and yeah, I don't know if this is makes any sense.
Yeah, it's really beautiful.
Um,
You bring together so many facets to this experience of what it means for you as a clarinetist in your own lived experience. So it is really wonderful what you bring to the discussion. I am really inspired. And so let's
Thank
move
you.
to the next question, and then we can also have
Uh-huh.
another few informal questions, because so many questions are on
Sure,
my
sure.
mind that I want to ask you in response to what you're saying. So
Sure.
what is a publication in the broadest sense, or a
Mm-hmm.
book or anything out there that people can get access to, that you would recommend to the artistic research community's self-promotion welcome?
Okay. So I thought a lot about this, and I was thinking about, something very related to what I do, but then I decided no. And so I would recommend What a Body Can Do by Ben Spatz.
Mhm.
Um, and on there he talks about theory of embodied knowledge, embodied technique as knowledge, and viewing technique as both training and research, and yeah, the debate about practice as research. I think I would recommend that, just because it I don't know, it opened a lot of doors in my mind to think about things and how to think about things. Um, yeah, and also read a lot about like theater and dance, and because they are more they are more used to write about their experience and their body than us musicians, just because of the way the art is made. So yeah, What a Body Can Do by Ben Spatz would be my recommendation.
So when it comes to autoethnography, how do you view that? And particularly, how do you approach it when it comes to you're making clear your methodologies, or you're putting things in writing? Like, what does that part, like what does writing, what kind of role does writing play? Given that your music is in many ways, like the research is the practice, right? And so
Yeah, yeah.
incredibly powerful. And so I'm just wondering, does writing and written documents play any role, or like how do you kind of navigate those words?
So I try to. Um, so I was doing things in a very by the book way, like by 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 just following whatever existed, and then I met Professor Lodges, and things changed. um, and so now my methodology and my whole way of seeing things is in flux. What I'm doing at the moment is I am recording everything that I do. So I'm recording my practice sessions, I'm recording my performances, um, and I'm trying to use as many scientific methods to understand what I'm doing, so that then I can um, distill that and see what really matters. For example, I record myself um, practicing something, and I've been doing these experiences with like heart monitors, where I see, because like I said, a lot of it is physical. So I'm trying to like just understand as much as I can from my own practice. And I'm taking auto ethnography as literally as I can right now.